You are in the most intimate moment two human beings can share. You are as close to her as physically possible. And somewhere underneath everything happening in that room, underneath all of it, there is a question you have never once said out loud. What is she actually feeling right now? Not what she is showing you, not what she says afterward. What is genuinely happening inside her body and her mind in that specific moment you are both together. You have wondered this your entire life. Every man has. And nobody, not your father, not any conversation you have ever had, not anything you ever watched or read, nobody has ever sat you down and told you the truth about it. Until right now. What I am about to share is the conversation that should have happened decades ago. The biological truth about what she is actually experiencing the moment you enter her world completely. The neurochemical reality of what is happening inside her that she herself may never have had the language to explain to you. And what understanding all of this means for every intimate moment you have from this day forward. You are not failing her because you did not care. You care enormously. Every man I have worked with across more than a decade of clinical practice cares deeply. You were failing to reach the full depth of what those moments could be because nobody ever gave you the biological truth about what is actually happening on her side. That absence ends today. My name is Dr. Jocelyn, a board-certified urologist with over a decade of clinical experience working with men's health, intimate function, and the biology that underlies everything we are about to discuss. If this kind of honest, clinically grounded content is what you have been missing, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Every week, I bring you the truth about men's health and intimate well-being that you deserve. Stay with me, because what comes next is the most important thing anyone has ever told you about the woman you love. Here is the first thing most men have completely wrong. And it is the misunderstanding that quietly shapes every intimate encounter that follows. Most men experience the moment of entry as a beginning, the start of what they have been building toward. For her, that moment is something far more complex. It is a culmination and a neurological event and a trust transaction. All happening simultaneously. Whether that moment becomes what it is genuinely capable of being depends almost entirely on what happened in the minutes before it, and on one quality in you that has nothing to do with physical performance. I want you to meet David, 61 years old, married to the same woman for 32 years. He came to my clinic not because anything was clinically wrong, but because something had quietly shifted in their intimate life. His wife was present, but not fully there. Encounters felt functional, but rarely profound. He assumed it was age. He was wrong. What David was experiencing was the consequence of a gap in understanding that nobody had ever filled for him. By the end of our conversation, everything shifted. Today, I am giving you exactly what I gave David. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part that changes everything. What is happening in her body before you even make your move. Long before you reach the moment of entry, her body has already begun a preparation sequence that most men have never had explained to them. And as a clinician, I want to be very clear about this. What I am describing is not poetic language. This is documented physiology. This is what is genuinely happening inside her. It starts not in her body, it starts in her brain. When a woman begins to experience genuine desire, not obligation, not habit, but real desire rooted in feeling safe and genuinely wanted. Her parasympathetic nervous system activates. This is the branch of the autonomic nervous system responsible for safety, rest, and openness. It begins driving increased blood flow toward the pelvic region in a vascular response that is the biological engine of everything that follows. Think of it as a power grid coming online. One circuit activates the next. Each system comes up in sequence until the full architecture of her arousal is operational. And here is what most men do not realize, that grid cannot be rushed without consequences that both of you will feel, but neither of you will be able to name. As blood flow increases, the internal clitoral complex, not the small external point most people are aware of, but a full internal architecture of sensitive tissue extending along both sides of the vaginal canal becomes engorged with blood. This engorgement dramatically amplifies the sensitivity of every nerve ending in the region. Her body is not just warming up, it is becoming a completely different sensory environment than it was 60 seconds before. Simultaneously, the vaginal walls begin producing natural lubrication through a process called transudate, fluid literally pressed through the vaginal walls by increased blood pressure in surrounding tissue. This is not something she decides. This is her body producing the biological conditions for connection in response to the neurological signal that something meaningful is happening between you. And here is the piece most men have genuinely never heard. A process called vaginal tenting occurs. The upper portion of the vaginal canal lengthens and expands. The cervix lifts as the uterus rises slightly within the pelvis. Her body is making internal space for you, creating room in a way that nothing else in her physiology does for anyone else. That process is not mechanical. It is biological trust made physical. The pelvic floor musculature begins to progressively relax as arousal deepens. But this relaxation is not automatic. It requires the specific neurological conditions of genuine, unhurried arousal. A woman whose nervous system has not fully arrived at safety and readiness will not have released this musculature, regardless of how willing she appears externally. Her body will not pretend otherwise, no matter what her words are saying. This entire sequence takes between 15 and 45 minutes for most women. For women in their 50s and 60s, hormonal changes mean this process requires more time, not less. More patience, more presence, more of exactly what a man at this stage of life is more capable of offering than he has ever been. The urgency many men over 60 carry around maintaining an erection, the quiet anxiety that the window might close, creates pressure to move quickly that directly works against everything her body is trying to complete. When a man rushes this process, he is, without knowing it, ensuring a less profound experience than the same encounter could have produced. Biology does not negotiate with urgency. It rewards presence every single time. Everything I just described, every biological step of that preparation sequence, exists for one reason. And what happens in the 60 seconds after it completes either honors everything her body just did or wastes it entirely. Here is what she is actually experiencing the moment you enter. When entry occurs in a body that has completed this preparation sequence, the experience for a woman is neurologically and psychologically layered in ways that go far beyond what most men have imagined. The moment of initial entry activates the dense concentration of nerve endings at the vaginal entrance and the engorged internal tissue simultaneously. Every nerve structure that generates the most intense sensation is now fully sensitized and fully alive, in a way that is only possible after the complete arousal sequence has run its course. Entry into a fully prepared body and entry into a body that has been rushed are not the same experience. They are not even close. And she has felt that difference every single time, even when she never said so. The sensation she experiences is not simply physical contact. It is what many women describe as grounding, a settling, something that centers rather than simply stimulates. A deep, distributed sensory experience engaging her entire internal landscape at once. Many women have felt this their entire intimate lives and had no clinical language for what it actually was. Now you do. Then neurochemistry happens. And this is the moment I need every man watching to hold on to, because this single biological fact explains something you have felt your entire intimate life without ever having language for it. At the moment of entry, during a desired, safe, emotionally connected encounter, her brain releases oxytocin. You may have heard this called the bonding hormone. What that phrase does not capture is what oxytocin actually produces at the precise moment of its release. This is not a metaphor. This is a documented, measurable biological event. A surge of a specific neurochemical producing a specific emotional state. The sense of being fully met by another person. of a gap between two separate human beings being bridged in a way that feels simultaneously physical and emotionally complete. The difference you have felt between intimacy that moved you and intimacy that did not was not in your imagination. It was chemistry. It was this. Leave a comment right now and tell me, has anyone ever explained this to you before? Because across more than a decade of clinical practice, most men tell me nobody has. And that gap has cost more relationships, more depth than almost anything else I see professionally. The oxytocin surge is amplified by emotional safety, by genuine connection, by feeling truly desired rather than simply needed. A man who is genuinely present, genuinely attentive, genuinely invested in her experience, is creating physiological conditions in her body that produce considerably richer sensation than the identical physical act performed by a man who is distracted or hurried. Emotional presence is not a courtesy. It is a physiological prerequisite for her full experience, what she is actually trusting you with in that moment. The physical vulnerability of being entered by another person has no male equivalent. None. To allow another person into your body requires trust, not the general trust of a long relationship, but the specific moment-by-moment trust of complete physical openness with someone larger and physically stronger than you. The pelvic floor muscles, which in their resting state are protective and closed, have to actively release and open. This does not happen when trust is absent. Her body knows the difference between safe and unsafe at a level far beneath conscious thought. In my clinical work, I speak with women regularly, wives, partners of the men who sit across from me in consultation. And what they describe, when given real space to be honest, is that the quality of their experience in intimate moments is determined far less by what their partner does physically and far more by how present he actually is, how seen she feels, how unhurried the approach was, whether the room felt emotionally safe or quietly transactional. These are not soft observations. These are the consistent clinical reports of women describing their own physiology and its response to the emotional environment their partner creates or fails to create. For women navigating hormonal shifts in their 50s and 60s, reduced estrogen affecting tissue elasticity and natural lubrication, changes in how long the arousal sequence takes to complete. The emotional quality of the encounter becomes even more central, not less. The biological reality is that the nervous system becomes more sensitive to emotional cues as hormonal support decreases. A woman in this season of life needs more emotional safety, not less. More time, not less. More genuine attunement, not performance. This is where a man of experience has an advantage that a younger man simply does not possess if he understands how to use it. What your presence actually does to her nervous system. I want to go deeper into something that most conversations about intimacy miss entirely, and that is the specific neurological impact of masculine presence on a woman's experience. When a man is genuinely present, not thinking about performance, not managing anxiety, not mentally elsewhere, his nervous system is regulated. And a regulated nervous system is neurologically contagious in the most literal biological sense. Through a process called co-regulation, two nervous systems in close physical proximity influence each other's states. Her nervous system is reading his, not consciously, not through words, through breath rate, muscle tension, the quality of touch, the pace of movement. Her parasympathetic system, the one responsible for opening and safety, responds to the signals his nervous system is broadcasting. A man who is anxious, hurried, or distracted broadcasts nervous system signals that her body reads as reasons to contract rather than open. The pelvic floor muscles, which require parasympathetic activation to fully release, respond to these signals at a biological level that precedes any conscious awareness. A man who is calm, present, and genuinely attentive creates a neurological environment in which her entire preparation sequence can complete properly. This is not a small variable. In my clinical assessment, the emotional and neurological environment a man creates accounts for a significant portion of the variation in a woman's experience across different encounters with the same partner. You are not just physically present in that room. You are a neurological influence on her entire physiological state. That is not a responsibility to feel burdened by. That is information to feel empowered by. What David learned and what it changed. When David came back to my clinic 3 months after our initial conversation, he did not describe a physical transformation. He described something quieter and more significant. His wife had started initiating again, not frequently, but meaningfully. After years of encounters that had felt dutiful on her end, something had shifted. He had not changed medications. He had not altered anything physical. What he had changed was his understanding of what was actually happening for her. And that understanding had changed how he approached every moment before, during, and after. He had stopped rushing toward the destination and started understanding the journey as the destination. He had stopped measuring the quality of the encounter by his own experience and started being genuinely curious about hers. He had started giving the preparation sequence the time it biologically requires, understanding for the first time that patience was not a sacrifice, it was the most physiologically intelligent thing he could offer her. And she had felt it, not because he had told her any of this, because her body had felt the difference between a man who was hurrying through her experience and a man who was genuinely present within it. That is the most consistent result I see when men receive this information and actually integrate it. Their partners feel it before they can even articulate what changed, what this means for you, starting tonight. Here is what I want you to leave with, not as abstract concepts, but as practical, biological truths you can carry into your next intimate moment. Her preparation sequence is not optional, and it is not symbolic. It is a physiological sequence with a minimum time requirement that varies by individual and by hormonal stage of life. Honoring that sequence is the single most impactful thing you can do for the quality of her experience, not technique, not duration, the completion of her biological preparation. Your emotional presence is a physiological input, not a relational nicety. Her nervous system is reading yours. The quality of your presence, your calm, your attention, your genuine investment in her experience creates measurable changes in her physiological state that determine how fully her body can open to what you are offering. The oxytocin that is released when entry occurs during a safe, desired, emotionally connected encounter is not incidental. It is the neurochemical architecture of what makes intimacy feel like intimacy rather than physical proximity. You are capable of being the person who reliably creates those conditions. That capacity is not physical. It is attitudinal. It is a choice about where you put your attention. For women navigating hormonal changes, patience is not accommodation. It is biological necessity and biological intelligence. The men who understand this become, without exception, more cherished partners than they were at any earlier stage of life. Experience combined with understanding is a combination that nothing else replicates. And finally, what you now know is something most men go their entire lives without understanding. You have been given, in this single conversation, the clinical truth about what is actually happening for the woman you love in the moments that matter most. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. But I will tell you this. Every man I have ever seen integrate this understanding, truly integrate it, not just intellectually register it, has described the same result. Intimacy that finally felt like what they always sensed it was supposed to be. Connection that moved them in ways they had stopped expecting. A partner who felt genuinely met, perhaps for the first time. That is what biological truth in service of love actually produces. If this conversation gave you something you have been missing, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what landed. Tell me what surprised you. Tell me what you wish someone had explained to you 30 years ago. And if you know a man who deserves to have this conversation, a friend, a brother, someone you care about, share this with him. Because the gap in understanding I described at the beginning of this video is not one man's problem. It is something an entire generation of men was never given the tools to close. I am Dr. Jocelyn. Subscribe if you want more of this honest, clinically grounded, genuinely useful conversations about the biology of men's health and intimate well-being. This is the kind of content that should have always existed for men like you. I will see you in the next one.